One of the most significant books of the Old Testament, a wisdom book, is the book of Job. Job was written sometime around 400 BC, and it's written to reflect upon the question, why do good people suffer? Because according to wisdom literature in Israel, if you follow the law, if you follow God's path, then you'll live a long life, you'll be happy, you'll be prosperous. But it just doesn't seem to work out that way. Good people suffer, they die young. Why is this happening? Well, let's ask the basic question, why is there suffering in the world? There are three possible answers. Maybe there's suffering because we're being punished for our sin. Adam and Eve sinned, and because of that, Eve suffers childbirth pains, and pain is passed down in the world. The difficulty with that theory is that even before Adam and Eve exist, we believe dinosaurs existed. We believe the world was already somewhat formed. And we know that there was pain and suffering. Maybe not for humans, but for animals certainly. It seems as if even before we sinned, there was suffering in the world. Now, admittedly, sin multiplies suffering, but it seems as if suffering is part of the fabric of being. Maybe suffering exists because God can't do a thing about it. God formed the world and He let it go on its own. Now it's just proceeding without God's intervention. I'm a Franciscan. We never believe that. Every squirrel that runs across the front yard was a gift of God. We praise God for all of creation. Well, there's also a theory that there's two gods, a good God and a bad God. Good God is winning when everything's wonderful in the world. Bad God is winning when things are not going well. And again, we don't believe that. We believe there's only one God who's all good and created everything to be good. And so that's where we get to the book of Job. Job is a good man, large family, very prosperous, very religious. And one day Satan, who's a type of district attorney, is reporting to God. And he says, I bet you if you take everything away from him, he'll curse you. So God says, okay, take it away, but don't hurt him. Satan takes it away. Job refuses to curse God. So Satan comes back and says, if you hurt him, I bet he curses you. God says, okay, we'll try that. Everything's taken away. Job scraping sores off his body, and yet he refuses to curse God. Well, three of Job's friends come to console him. And for a few days, they can't even say anything. They're so horrified by what they see. But eventually, they start talking to Job. And instead of consoling him, they actually torment him. Because they give the old theory, suffering is caused by sin. You're suffering, therefore you must have sinned. So if you sinned, if you admit it, then maybe God will forgive you and the suffering will go away. The difficulty, Job is an honest man. As much as he would like to say, I've sinned, he can't say it. He does say, I'm a sinner like everybody, but not enough to deserve this. And they keep pushing and pushing, and they say, you're trying to say that God's a liar, God's unfair. They're trying to defend God as if God is not big enough to take care of himself. And so eventually Job says, I wish I could challenge God to come down here and explain himself. He says it in very strong words. He says, sometimes I feel like a dried up leaf that God blows around the courtyard for his amusement. I wish I had an iron chisel so I could chisel my charges against God in that wall, and anyone who passed by could see it. And eventually God does come down. And God says, Job, where's the sun during the night? Job says, I don't know. Where's the snow during the summer? I don't know. Gee, Job, for somebody who's questioning my motives, you don't know an awful lot. And Job at the end says, now I understand that I don't understand. I have to trust. The book of Job doesn't explain why suffering exists. It explains what to do when we're suffering. And the answer, we trust. Even when trust doesn't seem possible. Sometimes we trust beyond trust. Sometimes we'll have to say to ourselves, I wish I could trust, but I'm not sure I can today. All God asks us to do is surrender as much as we can. And if we don't surrender perfectly, that's perfectly fine. We can surrender to the fact that we didn't surrender perfectly. We follow him as much as we can, believing that when we're on the cross, like his son was, we are not abandoned. He loves us so much because we realize who's on the other side of that cross. When we suffer, we are one with the suffering Christ.